Good morning. This is the next section of Spare. And it's not getting better. It's not getting better for Harry. He is not showing a better side of him. I keep waiting for him to start acting like the royal prince that he is. I keep waiting for him to show some manners that surely his family had paid for him to learn. The tone in this book is dripping with condescension. It is just cruel. It's twisted. So intentionally unkind. It's not like he accidentally said something. I was like, well, that wording was weird. It's like, bam, bam, bam. I'm going to get everybody who's ever gotten me for anything. He is just like walking through a crowd of people with a machete. It is crazy to me how he thinks that he can get away with this. How he thinks that this is going to garner him any sympathy at all. He tells a story about his dad that is so viciously unkind. It's exposure of his father. I cannot even imagine telling the story about somebody that I strongly disliked. But to tell this story about your own father, it's just such an intimate detail. It's such a personal story. And he's just so disdainful about it. So he in this section, he's also just going hard on William. William has always been a tyrant. William's always lorded over the heir title, and he's always just had to clump along behind like the spare he is. It's like, okay, even if you think that that's true, even if you think the whole world looks at you like you're just extra parts, you don't have to wear that title. You can be everything you ever wanted to be in the space that you are in. You don't need to wait for other people to tell you how to feel, but that's the thing. This whole section is littered with examples of him waiting for other people to tell him how he's supposed to think and what he's supposed to do next and how he's supposed to behave and what's the cool thing. Okay, I'll do that. He does not possess the ability to decide how he feels about himself. And so if somebody says something negative about him, he wears that. And so that's, I think, why the press has just been such a horrible experience for him, because he does not possess the ability to let it. It's never going to be water off a duck's back for Harry. It's never going to be something he can just be like, that's a crazy story. Anyway, and I've never, clearly I am a nobody. No one's ever hounded me. So maybe I'd be singing a different tune if I opened up the paper and read stories about me that weren't true. I'm sure that's frustrating. But you have to know that comes with the territory. And he's surrounded by people who have lived that their whole lives. It seems like there would be somebody in his life who could come alongside of him and say, dear boy, it's going to get crazy. People are going to say things about you that aren't true. Rise above it. Rise above it. He doesn't rise above it. And if anything, he's over there just slinging mud with the best of them now. So this was a really interesting section. We're really getting into the bed of his insecurities. He's I don't know if he's going to talk more about this. He mentioned very briefly he had rage issues. It's one of the reasons he really enjoyed sports, so that he could exercise the demons of rage. And he's also going to make a particularly stinging point against a journalist that, for fans of this channel, no, I will not accept. He decides to say some things about somebody that, it is so hypocritical. It's like, that's Harry's MO. He could have just, forget the title Spare, he should have entitled the book Hypocrite. Every single page is him explaining how somebody did something really terrible and dumb, and then literally he's doing it in the same passage. How can he do this with a straight face anymore? I don't understand. But let's get into this. It's really good. I got my tea. Have you got your popcorn? We're ready to go. But I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this. Subscribe to the channel. We can feel like these videos are, it's just royal silliness. Somebody said to me the other day, what are you talking about all this royal silliness for? Well, it is royal silliness, except for 100 years from now, when you're reading about this entire time period in a history book. We will have been living through it, and it doesn't matter. Just because it's sensational doesn't mean it isn't history. This is history. This is the royal family. It's not the same thing as a regular celebrity in Hollywood wilding out and writing a memoir. It feels like Harry's a celebrity because he's married to a celebrity. be actress though she may be. But it's not, it has major implications on the politics in England. So, comfort your heart as you watch this, knowing that you're not feeding into the foolishness. This is a history channel, and this is history. Okay, tell yourself that. That's what I'm telling myself. Now we have come to the other woman, Camilla. Camilla has entered the picture. And he says that Willie knew for a long time that there was another woman. He put two and two together. It didn't take a genius to figure this out. And Harry says, well, I didn't know anything about it. I was just too young to know. And that makes sense. Also, that's not like they were ever with their dad. I mean, they were always off at school. So, good detective work, William, but I don't blame you, Harry, for not realizing it. So now that his mother has passed away, although he continues to not refer to her as passed away, she has disappeared. He never says dead. Disappeared. So now Charles is ready to move on with his life, to move on to the part that he wishes that he had lived openly and out loud his entire adult life. And he tells his sons that he wants them to meet Camilla. William has to go first. So he goes and he has tea with Camilla, and it's fine. Harry asks him about it when he comes back, and William is sort of tight-lipped about it. He says she was gracious. It wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. He's just glad that it's over, and if it makes Pa happy, let's just be supportive. Then it's Harry's turn, and Harry says, I have a dim recollection of Camilla being just as calm or bored as me. What is with these jabs? Like, does he know how this comes across? I mean, surely he can't have known how it comes across because he cares so much about what other people think, that if he had any idea how people would mock him soundly for the things he's done, he never would have written this book. But anyway, so he's like, bored Camilla, what a dud. Go along with my dud dad. And he says that, neither one of us fretted much about the opinion of the other. We just kind of sat there. I think we talked about horses or something. She likes horses. I'm a good rider, It's probably what we talked about. And then he says, but it didn't really matter what I thought because my opinion is next to nothing. My opinion is as good as dirt. The one that she really had to impress was William. So, I was just a formality, but nobody cares what I think. And it's just like, who told you that? Who told you, hey, nobody cares what you think? Who sat him down and said, now the heir is the one that we care about. Spare, you just show up. It's like, no one would have ever said that. You are equally as much of a son as William is to your father. And he's bringing a new woman into your lives shortly after the passing of your mother. Yes, your opinion matters. Why would you choose to believe that it doesn't? So many choices to believe things that are incorrect, or you have no validation for them. So you might as well choose the positive instead of the negative. He possesses no such ability. Then they talk about, he talks about the fact that he, kind of annoying that Camilla was there. She was the other woman, but at the same time, Pa needed someone. Then he starts talking about things he has no business talking about at all. I'm talking about the complete and total lack of common decency. He says, Pa had a really bad childhood, and his parents sent him off to this ridiculous place. It was like a prison camp, and he was bullied pretty badly because everything Pa is just got on everybody's nerves. And, he says that he barely survived. I don't know what that means, but I'll tell you one thing. It scarred him pretty bad because you know what he carries around all the time? This threadbare teddy bear. What a loser. He still drags it around. This is literally what Harry wrote about his father. Pa confessed around this time that he had been persecuted as a boy. Granny and Grandpa, to toughen him up, had shipped him off to Gordonston, a boarding school where he was horrendously bullied. The most likely victims of Gordonston bullies, he said, were creative types, sensitive types, bookish types. In other words, Pa. His finest qualities were bait for toughs. I remember him murmuring ominously, I nearly didn't survive. How had he? Head down, clutching his teddy bear, which he still owns years later. What a loser. Teddy went everywhere with Pa. It was a pitiful object. Broken arms, dangling threads. holes patched up here and there. It looked, I imagine, like Pa might have after the bullies had finished with him. Teddy expressed eloquently, better than Pa ever could, the essential loneliness of his childhood. And Willie and I agree that Pa deserved better. Apologies to Teddy. Pa deserved a proper companion. What a revelation. Not about King Charles. What a revelation about the hard heart within Harry. That he could ever tell that about anybody. And quite frankly, if he's trying to deride the king and make him look like he's some sort of pathetic object, all it does is garner sympathy, in my opinion. All it does is make me think, it just, like, my heart goes out to him. That as an adult, he would still have something like that. That little stuffed animal had meant something to him in a world in which he'd been so horribly bullied. And that his only companion was a teddy bear? Like, what? That does not make me feel like, what a feeble, sorry, pathetic old man. Harry is doing nothing for his case by telling us that. And he's only enlivening our sympathy and support for the king. So it's like every single thing he set out to do, he's just shooting himself in the foot time and time again. So then he talks about the fact that he and William gave their blessing. All right, Pa, this is where you're going to go. Better Camilla than that old dumb teddy bear you keep dragging around. And they say to him, we're fine with this, but our caveat is that we would like you not to marry her. Just, you can be open about it, but just don't replace our mother with Camilla. Because Camilla caused so many, there was so much drama in our family because of this other woman. To, like, be with her, but don't marry her. And Pa does not give any affirmative to this. He's not like, okay, sounds all right. No, he just sort of lets it go. But Camilla starts, according to Harry, a steady campaign aimed at marriage and eventually the crown. What a diabolical claim to make about somebody. I mean, it isn't like she just showed up on the scene and she is trying to wrestle the crown out of the hands of any rightful owner. It's like, she's been around for a real long time. And I think that it was all wrong that he had these affairs with Camilla. I think that he wanted peace in his home and yet continually chose a choice that would have only added to everybody's angst, frustration, and feelings of unlove. But the deed is done. Diana's dead. It's time to move on. And if this is the person he wants to move on with, who is Harry to say, look at her coming after the crown like that? I mean, this girl's playing the long con because it has been years since she's been with Charles. So I guess, maybe she really is. Maybe she's that vindictive and evil that she's been out there to plot and plan that one day she might be called queen. I mean, who knows? But he says that the real problem had nothing to do with the crown. The real problem was that she had talked Pa into hiring a new campaign spin doctor, and who was over there feeding bits of information to the press, intimate details, private details from conversations that the press could never have known anything about had they not had a source Camilla gave them. And now we see that he is over there conflating Camilla with the press. There is this tie between the two, and Camilla is the press. And all of this angst that he feels towards the press, I think began when he felt like Camilla and the press had joined in league to get her where she wanted to go and to leave scattered behind her plans the bodies of everybody's emotions. And that it didn't matter what had to be written so long as she got her place as queen next to the king. And I just don't know if that's really true. I mean, who knows? But we'll never know because he doesn't provide any information. He doesn't ever tell us anything that has any foundation to it. It's claim, claim, claim. But then it's like, well, you're saying that, but where's your evidence? How do you know? It's all I think. And then, as he has continued to say in every section we've talked about, I mean, my memory's real bad. Like, you guys don't even know how bad my memory is. I can't even explain to you how little I could remember, even back then. And it surprises me that he continues to beat the drum of his own incompetence. Why are you telling us this? If this book is aimed to guide our hearts and sympathies towards your cause, don't keep telling me that you can't remember exactly, what happened. I cannot be steered towards your cause if I can't be sure that you even remember what happened. All right, now he starts talking about school. School's bad. School's real bad for him. And even though he went to a boarding school, and it was presumably quite nice, you'd think it would be if they're educating the prince, he was not prepared when he got to Eton, by any stretch of the imagination. It would have seemed that he spent most of his time at school trying to outfox Pat, figuring out where the table of sweets were so he could cram a whole sleeve of Starburst into his mouth at once, and trying to get out of writing letters to his family. Those are the 3 points that he continually hits in this book about what he did back at Ludgrove. I don't know what sort of education he received at Ludgrove, but whatever it was not adequate. And perhaps it was, we know he didn't really want to do any of the schoolwork that was set in front of him. We know he resented anyone who asked him to do anything. So maybe they did try to prepare him, but he was out to lunch. And he says that the reason he didn't do well at school is that he could not memorize anything because he was trying to avoid his memory all the time. And he says that he was always trying to avoid quiet time because in the quiet was when the memories would come about his mother. And the more poignant memories and the sweeter the memory, the harder it was for him to endure. Now, I have sympathy for that. I can only imagine how frightening the silence would be if you were trying to avoid the memories of your mother. And also, he's continually grappling with the fact that she's actually dead. And he has not, to this point, admitted to himself that she is. He's now 14 in this section of the story, and he's still describing her as disappeared. So I could imagine sitting by yourself in the silence trying to study would throw open the doors for all sorts of unwelcome thoughts. Anyway, he says that since he couldn't memorize and school really is just a long series of memorizations, that no wonder he didn't do well. And he says that one of the other trials at Eton was that William would have nothing to do with him. And William had apparently said, look, Eton has been a haven for me. I haven't had you around all the time for the last 2 years, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I'm going to go about my business, and you pretend like you don't even know me. Okay, I have never said anything like that to any of my siblings, and I can't imagine, especially in a situation in which we were away from home and we didn't have our parents, that I wouldn't at least sort of look out for my younger siblings. I'm the oldest of 5, and I cannot think of one of my siblings in which I would say, you pretend like you don't even know me. Stay away from me. Okay, I can't imagine saying that. But it seems like there are a lot of siblings I've heard who don't want to associate with their siblings at school. They want to have their own separate identity. They don't want to have to share their identity with a sibling. Okay, well, that's not beyond the pale, okay? So for Harry to act like, how dare he? Where does it even come off? What kind of evilness is that? Well, that's just the immaturity of siblings. He just doesn't want to be his brother's keeper. And that wouldn't be my response, but I don't think that is so crazy that it cannot be conceived of. So he's really having a hard time of it. He doesn't like anything about Eton. He especially doesn't like the uniforms, which apparently are funeral dress. Because they're supposed to be in forever mourning for the king. The founder of the school, once he died, they have adopted a funeral dress with the full-on black tailcoat, white collarless shirt, white stiff collar pinned to the shirt with a stud, pinstripe trousers, heavy black shoes, and a tie that wasn't a tie, more like a cloth folded into the white detached collar. Formal kit, they called it, but it wasn't formal, it was funeral. And so he's like, can you imagine how that felt for me? I just lost my mom 2 years ago, and now they're making me dress like it's for a funeral all the time. But it's like, yeah, you and everyone else. And I can't imagine that there weren't some children in that entire school who had also lost a parent or who had also been through tragedy. Everything is always about some slight against him. I couldn't get past having to put on that uniform every day. Funeral clothes is what they were, funeral clothes. Yes, but why are you making it worse for yourself by finding these connections that are just painful? Why are you looking to hurt yourself? Which leads us to the next point, that he talks about how he played a lot of sports when he was at Eton. And he liked rugby, and he liked cricket and football and polo. And he liked them especially because, he liked rugby especially because he said, rugby let me indulge my rage. Which some had now taken to calling a red mist. Plus, I simply didn't feel pain the way other boys did, which made me scary on a pitch. No one had an answer for a boy actually seeking external pain to match his internal. That's a significantly dark passage about his mental health. Rage issues that he is trying to exercise through sports and being so aggressive on the field because he didn't feel pain but was also looking to feel pain at the same time. I mean, if that's true, and we can only believe that it is, considering how fraught his mental health has been up to this point, that's a really dark passage. And he just skims right past. I mean, like, not another comment is made. It's like, how about a little bit more on that and a little less on your dad's teddy bear? There's an idea. Maybe talk about your own problems and leave your dad out of it. And then he talks about the fact that he started to get into some trouble at Eton. Everyone was always smoking cigarettes. They like to have their tabbage, their cigarettes, these words. And he, started taking to smoking, not because he liked it or anything, but people offered it to him. So what are you gonna do? I don't know, not smoke? There's an idea. It's like, and continually throughout the rest of this section, it's, I didn't really want to, but they said to, so I did. Well, no wonder you're in the mess you are in now. When have you ever said no to anything? If somebody tells you to do something, you have an option. So smoking, he started smoking cigarettes, then he started smoking weed. He just couldn't say no to anything. I mean, when they told him to do it, he just did it. And he just wanted to be liked. And he wanted to be one of the funny guys. Well, one day he is in his dorm and they get the idea that he needs a haircut. Now, I have a feeling that his friends, knowing that he was going to be the one that would do whatever they said, may have taken advantage of that with him. I don't know how friendly these people were to him. But he says that they came to him and they said, hey, you need a haircut. Let's shave your head. And he in the moment was like, oh, well, that's kind of different, but okay. And they get up the razor and then they shave his head. And he goes and he looks in the mirror and he's horrified and he's super upset that he let it happen. And he does the one thing that he knew he was never supposed to do. He runs upstairs. They're in the same house. He runs upstairs to William and says, look what they've done to me. And William has no sympathy. He's like, well, why'd you let him do that? That doesn't look good. What was that choice, Harold? And Harry's like, you would. I came to you for sympathy, and this is what I get. And so he stumbles back down the stairs. And then he was even more upset because he already felt foolish. He already knew he looked dumb. And then the papers ran a story about him and called him a skinhead. They didn't have a picture, but they had photoshopped a photo to mimic what he might look like. And he resented that. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't resent that? You're 14 years old and you look foolish and then they print a picture. Okay, I can understand being pretty annoyed. And I also understand that at the age of 14, you don't possess the ability to ignore when other people are insulting to you, especially if it's in a newspaper. I can understand feeling upset about that. But it also feels like, again, somebody at some point must have taken him aside and said, you're going to get bad press. And this is how we handle it. Who would have just fed him to the wolves like this? If anybody said anything to him about take the high road, I just don't know how much he was actually listening to that. So he's upset. They've written a story about that. But then he gets even more mad because they don't stop there. Then they write a story about how he's had an accident. And he had an accident. He broke a finger, but it wasn't a big deal. He had to go to the hospital and they set the bone. Okay, it's all done. Well, somehow this story made it to the papers, and they had written this very sort of cloak and dagger story about how Harry's been wounded. Can't say exactly how, but we think you should know that if any heir to the throne has ever been injured, you should know. Well, I mean, that is an annoying story. It's like, first of all, as a reader, who wants to read that? That didn't tell me a thing. But then also, a broken finger is not really a story. Stop trying to make a story out of nothing. You know, if you don't have anything to say, write about something else. So, as a consumer of the news, that kind of story would annoy me. Now, as a person who the story is about, again, that would be annoying. Nothing happened. I broke my finger. Big deal. But again, nothing happened. It's not like they wrote a story and talked about how, he had almost drowned and, he had been dragged 17 miles behind a horse-drawn carriage. I mean, it's not like it was some sensational story. It was just a dumb story. And he has the gall, once again, to conflate it to his mother's passing. And he says that I'd broken a bone in my thumb playing rugby. No big deal. But the paper decided to make out that I was on life support. Bad taste under any circumstances. But a little more than a year after Mummy's alleged accident? Come on, fellas. This doesn't have anything to do with your mom's accident. Yes, they're just trying to get traction to the paper. They're just trying to get people to read it. Okay, well, you are a famous prince, so expect a couple of stories to come out. But this is the thing that I was just like, of all the people in the world, you're the last person to pass judgment. He goes on to talk about not the content of the story, but the quality of the writing. Fans of this channel will know I don't take that lightly. This book, by the way, was written by a ghostwriter, Harry. You couldn't even manage to write your own story. So why don't you lay off the other people who do manage to put pen to paper? This is what he writes about the story. Before trying to move on with my life, I took one last look at the article. Of all the things that surprised me about it, the true flabbergasting thing was the absolutely shitty writing. I was a poor student, a dreadful writer, and yet I had enough education to recognize that this right here was a masterclass in illiteracy. Is he talking about his own book? To take one example, after explaining that I had been grievously injured, that I was nearly at death's door, the article went on to caution breathlessly that the exact nature of my injuries couldn't be revealed because the royal family had forbidden the editors to do so, as if my family had any control over these ghouls. Quote, to reassure you, we can say that Harry's injuries are not serious, but the accident was considered grave enough for him to be taken to hospital. But we believe you are entitled to know if an heir to the throne is involved in any accident, however small, if it results in injury. The two butts in a row, the smug self-regard, the lack of coherence and absence of any real point, the hysterical nothingness of it all. This dog's dinner of a paragraph was said to be edited, or more likely written, by a young journalist whose name I scanned and then quickly forgot. I didn't think I'd ever run across it, or him again. The way he wrote, I can imagine he'd be a working journalist much longer. How can he say these things with a straight face? How can he read the prologue to his own book and say, that guy over there? What a loser. That guy over there? He could never write. I never thought I'd see him again. Harry, somebody wrote your book for you. It is so crazy to me that he would allow this passage, this self-congratulatory passage that he could spot bad writing in a book that is one of the most horrific pieces of writing I have ever seen. It's wild to me that he would even give himself the pleasure of writing about somebody else's bad writing through a ghost writer who is writing his book. The hypocrisy of it. How can he live with himself? We have so many instances. We are on page 47. We have 3 major instances already of him in the moment saying, that person over there, what a terrible, terrible person they are because of X, Y, and Z. As he's in the moment doing the exact same thing. Who even edited that paragraph? Who even edited your book? This paragraph right here? This whole litany against somebody else's writing? Who let you say that? I am floored. Talk about flabbergasted. Okay, so then he goes on to say that he was building a reputation for himself. And, through no fault of his own. Everyone kept saying things about him that just weren't true. And the word they really liked to use about him was naughty. He was naughty. He was naughty, they said, all the time. But he didn't want to be naughty. It's just the way people understood him. But he wasn't trying to be naughty. And it's like, okay, well, the kid dancing at the bottom of the stairs to poor Pat as she tries to descend backwards down the stairs because she can't walk due to her back and knees, that kid was kind of a jerk. The kid who, would get up in the middle of the night and run to the neighboring farm and stuff his face for hours on somebody else's strawberries, kind of naughty. The guy who's cutting class so he can smoke under the bridge and eat McDonald's, not a world-class pupil. The person who is out on the pitch beating others into the ground so that he can exercise his rage, problematic. But he wasn't naughty. How dare you call him naughty? So he's annoyed because he says that nobody understands him and nobody makes any effort to understand him. Well, he should have a lot of experience in ignoring people's intentions, because that's what he does 24/7. And he says that he was the greatest disappointment to his father because he wasn't a reader. And he didn't like to read. And again, it was hard for him because when he sat down to read, he just thought about his mom. So he just didn't read. But he did like the Book of Mice and Men, because it was about two brothers, or two partners in life. And he liked the book, and it wasn't long. It got straight to the point. It was only like 150 pages. So thank God for that. And then he talks about the fact that there was two brothers, neither a genius, but Lenny's trouble seemed to be more than low IQ. He keeps a dead mouse in his pocket, strokes it with his thumb for comfort. He also loves a puppy so much he kills it. A story about friendship, about brotherhood, about loyalty was filled with themes I found relatable. I'm sure Lenny did strike a chord in your heart. We end this section with his vacation to Africa. He went on a safari with William, and he had a great time. And he doesn't say anything really about William in this passage yet that we've gotten to. He just says that they went together and it was a really good time, and that one of the things that he enjoyed especially about that trip was the camaraderie that he had with the people on the safari with him, and that it was just a lot of warmth and laughter and good times, and they would gather around the fire, and for the first time in his life he wasn't afraid to be in the dark, because he had this big group of people around him who included him and laughed with him and were raucous with him, and it was just great times. So that's where I've ended our section today. It's such an insight into what can happen to a person who only ever indulges their side of things in their own mind. And if reading this has taught me anything, it's that I have got to avoid ever deciding that I understand what somebody meant if they didn't tell me what they meant. And that to spend all this kind of time stewing about things that I'm not actually sure about, but that I assume and presume are what's going on, I will mark my life with sadness and disappointment. And this is a study in what happens when you're never held account for your assumptions. And it's just destroying his life. It's destroying his life. All right, stay tuned for the next installment. I will be putting it out on Sunday, so look for it on Sunday. Bye.